This is my 2012 McLaren MP412C. I've owned it for 1 year, 1 week, and 1 day. And I'm going to tell you about the experience that I've had in that year's time. So a little bit of background on how I got this. Found it in California. I live in South Carolina. I flew out to California immediately to pick this up. I got it from West Coast Exotic Cars, and it had 16,000 miles and some hundred on it when I got it. In the first week that I had it in California, I put over 900 miles on it, driving it all over Southern California, and I enjoyed it a lot. So then I had to get it back to South Carolina. Didn't know if I'd want to drive it across country, 2,500 miles, didn't think that would be a great idea, so I had it sent on a carrier. That carrier was Dependable Carriers LLC out of Glendale, Arizona. F them. F them right in the ass. They caused over $3,000 worth of damage on this car from the wheels and a broken mirror shroud. This is carbon fiber, the whole thing had to be replaced. So, f them. I tried to sue them, didn't work out. Apparently, after they can't find you to serve papers, they just kill the case after 120 days. So remember, f Dependable Carriers LLC in Glendale, Arizona. Also, they put 6 miles on the car to go on and off a trailer. This being a 2012, even among these cars, it's actually very unique. 2012 is the only year that has slide to open doors. There's no button, there's no handle. 2012 is the only year that had that. All 2012s will be a coupe because they didn't introduce the Spider until 2013. Also worth noting, at the end of 2012, it went from the MP412C to just the 12C. They dropped the MP4. And if you were wondering what MP412C stands for, it is McLaren Project 4. 12 is a performance index that they used internally, and the C is for carbon, as in carbone fibre. Your 2012 could be slightly unique if you don't have the power upgrade that happened in 2013, and that was a free upgrade as the 2013 models came out with 25 horsepower more and some different tuning and programming. That was a free upgrade. This one does have that upgrade, so it could be a little bit different for your case, but this one's got it. Now this car is fully loaded. It has every option you could have except for a few pieces of carbon. However, that's not what makes this one special. What I do have is MSO carbon fiber. This piece right here that goes all the way up to the glass is normally painted, but mine is exposed carbon fiber. Lastly, in the back, we have valved exhaust. The early VINs up through like 400 or 450 had a valved exhaust. So if you wanted to be louder or quieter, you couldn't select it, but it would do it for you if you had it in track mode or sport or normal. That was something that the early ones did have, so that's where this one is unique. This one is number 362. The final item that makes a 2012 unique is there was no option for a lift. In 2013, they started offering lift as an option for front and rear, giving you more clearance so you wouldn't grind off your front bumper. One thing that McLarens are kind of known for, but really all supercars have kind of weird quirks that happen, and I've actually made a list that I'm going to have to read off of things that I've encountered in the last year. One that happens maybe 3 or 4 times it's happened. The parking brake will constantly engage after disabling. So I can disable it to pull it out of the garage, and I'll start moving, just let my foot off the brake, and it will just turn itself back on and stop. And then I'll disable it, and I might do this 4 times, and then it'll stop doing it. It's only happened a few times, but it's done it. One thing that's just kind of different, the mirror adjustments. People haven't figured out that the adjustments for front and rear depend on if you're going forward or backwards. So when you go to the mirror adjustment, when you're going forward, you set it where you want, but when you're going in reverse, you can tell it to move up or down or move any which way. But the way that you set that is you have to have it in reverse and then set the mirror and set it back to neutral, and it will save that setting. And a lot of people don't realize that. So they think when you back up, it either doesn't move very much or it moves in weird positions or anything like that. You can adjust those independently, which is kind of cool. Random fault lights. I've gotten various things that have said that the engine has to be shut off, pull the car over immediately, but everything seems to operate normally. In that case, you can just pull over, turn the car off, turn it back on, clears the fault. Various faults, it's happened several times. You just turn the car off, turn it back on, it's fine. There's been several instances where I might hit the active button here when you get in the car, and all of your settings will get turned on for normal, street, track, aero, manual, or automatic. And I leave it on manual, and when you hit active, it should just go to manual. But I've had it a few times where manual was unchecked to where it was in automatic mode, and then you just have to hit the button and tell it to go back into manual. It's happened a few times. It's really weird. There's no rhyme or reason. Just does it every once in a while. Hit the manual button. Everything's fine. That slide to open the door thing that's really cool and only on 2012s, there's a reason it's only on 2012s. It can be a little bit finicky. If you don't apply the right amount of pressure on the door or slide in the right spot, or if the door is very wet or your hand is wet or you're wearing gloves or a number of scenarios, it doesn't necessarily always open every time. After a year, I've gotten used to it. It opens pretty much every time I go to do it unless the underside of the door is wet, like I've just washed it. But other than that, apparently they think if you can't open every time, you should put a button there, and that's why the 2013s have a button. Every once in a while, it'll say key not recognized, and there's been various instances of interference from various different things. FM modulators, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. I've seen people say that if you had their phone in the same pocket as their key, that will cause the issue. If they've had it on the left side versus the right side, or various different things. I've seen it happen on a lot of different cars. It seems to be a little bit more common on these. Not a real issue if you can't figure it out, but if you just move the key somewhere else, it'll start every time. These have something called an intake sound generator, and you can adjust the volume of it for your different modes. So if you have a normal street or track, you can adjust the volume at which the intake sound generator is at a different volume. I have the volume turned all the way down on my ISG because it sounds fake. I really hate the sound of it. I want nothing to do with it. Yes, it makes it louder in the car, but it sounds fake. It's like a 1990s video game is what it sounds like to me. I want no part of it. There is an ISG delete because after some period of time, they might leak because there's no ring in there, or the baffles break inside it, something like that. I haven't had any problems with mine at all, but there is a delete for it because people generally hate it. It is not found in any other model but this. These strakes that are under the body are also known to get broken. The factory ones are made out of plastic. I made some prototypes out of fiberglass. As you can tell, these have taken a little bit of a beating too. But I'll be making some a little bit better revised versions of these out of fiberglass. But they are known to break, and people tend to not replace them because they don't know that they're broken or because they're super expensive. So I'm going to offer a much more economical and makes sense, and these are actually stronger version of that for people to replace on theirs. In the 1 year that I've owned this car, I have put over 9,200 miles on it. I have had one issue. There's a fluid reservoir that contains the hydraulic fluid for the steering, suspension, and the air brake. The fluid was just a little bit low, which caused an air brake fault. When it was supposed to go up, it would do a fault instead. Put like 1 or 2 ounces of fluid in there. Everything's been fine since. 9,200 miles. That's the only problem I've had. Slightly low on one fluid. Despite putting over 9,200 miles on this car in 1 year, it is not my daily driver. This is my weekend fun driver. I tour the mountains, toured Southern California. I've been to West Virginia, Florida. I drove this over 8 hours straight. Perfectly comfortable, everything felt fine. Super comfortable hydraulic suspension, very comfortable seats. This could absolutely be a daily driver, especially with a frunk space as huge as it is. I've taken it to the grocery store. I've taken it to various other stores, picking up large items like Costco. You can use this as a daily driver. There are a few things that I've done to this car in the time that I've had it, and I've made this handy dandy little list. The HVAC displays in the doors, they tend to get very dim and go bad. Even if they've been replaced under warranty, they still go bad in 1 to 2 years. Very common thing. I have a solution for that now. You can actually buy those replacement screens on emfcaraudio.com as seen there. We've got replacement screens that won't die again. The original problem that I guess McLaren never knew, figured out, whatever, we figured it out, reverse engineered. You can buy those displays and do those yourself. And there's also a instructional video on how to do that as well. I get asked all the time, how much are oil changes? They're around $100 because I did it myself. There's an entire instructional video that I did on how to change the oil in one of these. You only have to do it once a year, unless you're doing heavy track use. They say 10,000 miles per oil change. Who else is putting 10,000 miles on one of these? I'm the only guy. As I mentioned before, I had a mirror that was damaged in transport, so I replaced these mirrors. These are actually to a 720S. The shroud is exactly the same across every McLaren model. It will bolt right up, everything is fine. The only thing that's different with this one from the one that came on it is the weave is just a hair different. There's a seam right here on the 720s where the other ones are kind of one piece that go around. But I did replace these mirrors. I've also added a smart mirror. Now I know what you're wondering, how smart could the mirror be? Well, it's a complete Android operating system that adds a lot of extra features that solves a couple kind of weird things. So the navigation in this car does work, but entering in an address or anything like that is pretty rough. It gets you there, but entering things in there kind of sucks. So this will also give us live traffic, which we won't have regardless, but it also adds the ability to put a backup camera on here. We don't have a backup camera in 2012. That wasn't introduced until Iris 2 became normal in later models. So because we have the smart mirror, I have added a backup camera. I now have that. It shows in the mirror. That adds a lot of functionality that's great. I can do live traffic with Google Maps or anything else. And I can also log OBD2 data as well as view that through something like Dash Command, which I use all the time. On the performance side of things, I have done 3 things. First thing, I had Pirelli P0s on this car and they suck. They are absolutely awful tires. I replaced them with Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's. Incredible tires, I absolutely recommend them on this car. You should definitely get them. Second, I had AMS do a tune on this car. It added over 100 horsepower and over 100 foot-pounds of torque, and you can definitely tell it is there. This car gets a lot more woken up, and it was already fast. It's absolutely insane. Definitely well worth the money. The third thing that I have done is there's air boxes, 2 of them on this car that have the air filter in it. Inside those air boxes is foam. That foam apparently is there to make it quiet, so you don't hear the turbos, and you don't hear the blow-off valves, you don't hear anything else. So I took that out. That foam actually degrades over time. It can get clogged in your air filter, and that's why I was in there checking it. So the happy accident when I pulled all the foam out of the air box, the air comes in here, it goes onto a box down there, and because it's right by the window, when you have it down or even with the window up, you can hear the turbo spool, you can hear the blow-off valve, all those fun noises you wanted to hear, now you hear them. So take the foam out of your air box if you want to have that sound. Now this car does have a protective film across the entire car, which is great because I live in a state that has a ton of crap all over the road. And that's prevented any kind of damage happening to the front of the car or anywhere else, except for what happened today on the way here, where I now have a spot in my windshield where a stone came up and cracked it. Maybe repairable, may have to be replaced. I'm not sure, probably gonna be an expensive windshield. This was my first supercar. I've had it for 1 year. It's incredibly comfortable. The performance is outstanding and it's an incredible value. You should have no hesitation on buying one of these things. There's not a ton of problems that everybody says that happen with the engine transmissions. They all blow up. That's not a thing. It's a very isolated incident. I haven't had any problems. I can't imagine having anything else. This has just been incredible. The only downside to this is where I go forward. The only thing that makes any sense is a 720S. So put that in perspective. This would be a stepping stone to a 720S, but it's really hard to get any better anywhere near the money.